Let me explain to you how a lease actually works. When you lease a car, you're paying for the depreciation between the sales price you negotiate and what the car is expected to be worth at the end of the lease. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're going to lease a $40,000 car. You've negotiated the sales price to $35,000. Now, the bank is going to figure out what this car will be worth after the lease term. Let's say you're going to do a 3-year lease at 12,000 miles a year. That means you're allowed to drive 36,000 miles. So the bank is going to guess what this car will be worth in 3 years with 36,000 miles on it. And let's use 50% for the example. Now the residual amount is always based off the retail price of the car, not the sales price. So 50% of $40,000 is $20,000. You've negotiated the price of the car down to $35,000. So basically there's $15,000 difference between the sales price and the residual value. That's what your monthly payments are based on the lease. Now there's a couple things we add to that, which is sales tax, bank fee, and the interest rate on the lease. You put all that together, this is how you get your lease payment. Let me give you a different example. Let's say you have a $50,000 car. You negotiate the price down to $45,000, but instead of a 50% residual, which we had in the last example, it actually has a 60% residual. If the lease rates are the same, that $50,000 car may lease for the exact same monthly payment as the $40,000 car. And here you can see where there's an opportunity for you to get more car for your money. First of all, I'm going to break down what the lease options are at the end, and then we'll get into the other details. So when you lease a car, the lease is over, you have a paid contract, and now you own 3 options. Your first option is you can buy your own used car. Let's say it's been a great car for you, you really enjoy driving it, you have the opportunity to buy that car. And that buyout amount is actually set in your contract, so there's going to be no surprises. Now you need to be aware when you do buy out your own lease, you will pay tax on the buyout amount. And that buyout amount can be financed 100%, so it's not like this big cash lump sum that you're going to have to pay for at the end of the lease. Okay? The second option is you can just walk away from the car. Let's say you're just interested in getting a new model. Maybe the car hasn't been that reliable for you. Maybe it was in an accident and you got the car fixed and you just don't want it anymore. Well, when the lease is over, you have a paid contract, you can give the keys back to the bank and walk away from the car. Now keep in mind, if you do return the car and it has some damage on it, you have a couple choices. One, you can fix it on your own before you return the car, or the bank will send you a bill and you'll have to reimburse them. Another option you have on the lease is to sell it. If the car is worth more than the buyout amount, you can trade it into a dealership and use that equity, or even sell it to a neighbor or friend. So you do have some options there as well. I want to talk a little more in detail if you're going to buy your lease out at the end. There's some very important factors you want to consider. Why? Because I don't want you to overpay and put yourself in a bad position. One of the things you need to factor is how long you're going to keep the car for. If you're planning on buying it and then maybe selling it right away in a year, I'm going to recommend that you just walk away right then and there. In most cases, unless your buyout is way lower than the actual market value, in 1 year from your buyout, you're going to be in a bad position. So if you want to buy your lease, I want you to check the market value. We're going to do this the same way we're evaluating our trade-in. Let's say, for example, our buyout amount is $20,000 on a lease. You go to kellybluebook.com, you'll put in the information about the year of your car, the equipment on it, and the miles are on it. Let's see what the market value is. We really want to look at good and fair condition when we do this evaluation. If the market value is at or above $20,000, I think your car is going to be in line at a good price to buy it. Now keep in mind, when you do buy your car, you will pay sales tax on the buyout, and you might want to consider the cost of buying an extended warranty. Now here's something we have to be really careful about. Let's say your buyout amount is $20,000, but the market value is only $16,000 or $17,000. When you add tax to that and the cost of an extended warranty, you may now own that car for $23,000, $24,000 for a car that's immediately worth $16,000 or $17,000. That's something we don't want to do. So at that point, if we do that research, we're just going to walk away from the car and give the keys back to the bank. And that's a great thing, that you actually lease the car and you've saved yourself on some depreciation. So let me tell you when it is a good time to buy out your lease. The most important thing is when the buyout is way below market value, even when you consider factoring in the cost of sales tax and if you want to buy an extended warranty. Now, if you're in that position, you also might want to visit the fact of using that equity towards getting a new car right now. So make sure you look at that from both angles. Now, another reason why to buy out your lease, it just might be a car that you really loved, you've taken good care of it, your buyout's at the right price, and the monthly payment in buying it out is affordable. So there's nothing wrong with buying out that car. Our third option is just to walk away. That's a real nice thing about the lease. When the lease is over, you have a paid contract, and you can just give the keys back to the bank. Now, here's something that's really important that the average person does not know about, and it's really one of my secrets. Just the fact that you're in a lease doesn't mean that you just have to walk away from the car when it's over. If there's equity, it's yours, and it's really up to us to do the research to see if there's equity. Now, it's not uncommon for you to get a letter at the end of your lease from multiple dealerships saying, we'd like to get you into a new car, we can do this type of deal for you or that type of deal for you. They may already know that you have equity in your lease, and they're going to buy your car and keep that equity themselves. So it's really up to us. Let's find out if we have equity and then do our trade and negotiation the same way as any other car and let that money come to us. All right, so another option you have at the end of the lease is to sell your own car. Just because you're leasing it doesn't mean you can't sell it. If you can sell the car for any dollar amount over what your payoff is, that money is yours. So what makes a good lease? Cars that have a high residual value, cars that you can negotiate a large discount on, cars that have low lease rates, and cars that are offering big incentives like big rebates. Any combination of these can make for a really good lease. I've really had some major success in finding amazing leases just based on those factors. So just knowing that some cars lease for better than others, if you're a payment buyer and you want to get the most car for your money, do a lot of research. Call dealerships, ask them what are the best leases out there. Have them give you some numbers on those, and you'll see where the best deals are. So when you're leasing a car, there's a set amount of miles that you're allowed to drive per year. The typical mileage is either 10,000 miles a year, 12,000 miles a year, or 15,000 miles a year. Now, the first thing you should know is you don't have to drive exactly the 12,000 miles a year. It's a total over the term. So if you're doing a 3-year lease, 12,000 miles a year, you're allowed to drive 36,000 miles total. You can drive 10,000 miles one year, 20,000 miles the next year, and 6,000 miles the final year, as long as you're in line, okay? Now, let's figure out how to decipher if I should take a 12,000 mile a year lease or a 15,000 mile a year lease. You may not be sure. First thing I want you to know is I want you to be conservative with your mileage allowance. If you're thinking about driving 12,000 miles a year, but you may drive 13 or 14, I prefer you take the 15,000 mile a year lease allowance. And let me explain to you why. One, I don't want you looking at the odometer every time you get in the car worrying that you're going to drive over miles. There's no need for that. It's just really not necessary. The second reason is, by buying miles in advance, you're typically going to pay a fraction of the cost of what you're going to pay at the end of the lease. Let's say you have a car payment on a lease that's $300 a month at 12,000 miles per year. And you get a quote from the dealer at 15,000 miles a year, and it raises the payment $20. So $320. That $20 over a 3-year term is costing you $720 over the 3 years for the extra miles. So the difference between 12 and 15,000 miles a year is 3,000 miles a year. On a 3-year lease, that's a total of 9,000 miles. Well, the bank is charging 20 cents per mile at the end of the lease plus tax. If you're at 9,000 miles times 20 cents, that's $1,800 plus tax around $2,000. So you can clearly see, by going 15,000 miles in advance, it's costing you $720 over those 3 years, as opposed to you paying $2,000 at the end of the lease when you walk away. Let's talk about an example that happens on occasion that could potentially put you in a bad position. And that is if you lease a car, you've driven way over the miles that you're allowed, And instead of paying that mileage penalty when you return the car, you think you can avoid it by buying out your own lease. Here's what we need to be careful about. When you lease the car, let's say a 3-year lease with 36,000 miles, that buyout amount is based on a car with 36,000 miles on it. Let's say the buyout's $20,000. Well, let's say you just did some crazy driving over 3 years and the car has 60,000 miles at the end of the lease. Well, that's a big penalty that you pay the bank. So instead of writing a big check for a few $1,000s, you're thinking, well, I'm going to just avoid that by buying out my lease. Well, here's the problem, and here's what you have to be careful about. If your buyout is $20,000 at the end of the lease based on a car having 36,000 miles, that car with 60,000 miles may only be worth $15,000. Now you're buying it for $20,000 plus tax, you're buying it for $22,000. You're paying that mileage penalty by overpaying for your lease buyout. So you got to be really careful about that. There are some options that we can do to offset this mileage penalty, and here's one of them. When your lease is over, if you've driven way over the miles, let's establish what the market value is. Go to kellybluebook.com, find out what the good to fair value is of your trade-in. Let's compare that to our payoff. Let's say the good to value trade-in is $15,000. Our payoff is $20,000. Well, instead of writing this big check to the bank to turn in the car, or buying your car out and way overpaying market value, maybe you take a month and try and sell this car. Maybe you can sell it for $17,000 or $18,000 or $19,000. If that's the case, now you've really limited your loss to only $1,000 or $2,000 instead of $4,000 to $6,000. So if that's the case and you see yourself driving more miles, before the lease is over, start doing that research in 1 or 2 months. Then you can have time to sell the car and not put yourself in a bad position at the very end of the lease. A couple things I want you to think about if you're in a lease and you foresee that you're going to drive more miles than you're allowed. One of the things is call the bank you're leasing from and ask them if they'll allow you to buy more miles in advance. A lot of banks offer that. That's one thing. The other thing is, if you foresee that you are driving over miles, maybe you can put a little money aside per month, so when the lease is over, you've actually saved a clump of money that will help cover you, and you're not surprised with this big expense at the end of the lease. Let's talk about what's above and beyond normal wear and tear. I want you to imagine the circumference of a credit card. If there's any dents or long scratches or a bunch of dings in a panel, anything larger than the size of a credit card, that's something that the bank's going to hit you for, okay? Now, the cool thing is, if you have that, you have the opportunity to have that fixed before you turn in the car. A few other things you're responsible for before turning in a lease is to make sure the car is currently serviced. If there's a service light on the car and you turn in the lease, the bank may hit you for getting that fixed. You need to have tires that have a minimum tread width on it. So if the tires are bald, or even if the tires have good life on most of it but were worn wrong and the edge of the tire is bald, they're going to hit you for that. So you want to make sure that your tires are in good condition as well. I get asked this question all the time. Can I get out of my lease early? You definitely have the option to do that, but it's just important to establish what position you're in. Let's say you're in a 3-year lease, you're 2 years into it, and you want to get out of the car. It's real simple just to find out. Let's just call the bank, find out what you owe, then we'll do our own evaluation of what the car is worth. You can even take it to a dealership and find out what they'll give you for it. And now you know. For example, 2 years into a lease, you owe $20,000 to the bank. Car's only worth $18,000. So there's a $2,000 spread. Does it make sense to get out of the lease? Probably not. Well, what are our options? First option is you can try and sell the car private party. If you can get someone to buy it for $20,000 or more, boom, you're out of the lease right then and there. Or you could decide, you know what, instead of losing that $2,000, let me just stay in the lease for the last final year and then look at getting a new car then. There's another way to get out of your lease early. It's not uncommon for manufacturers to offer specials to get you into another one of their cars. They're called pull-through programs or early bird specials. And what they'll do is they'll offer to pay your last few remaining payments if you get into one of their cars. It's a really interesting option, and it's something you may want to take advantage of. Now, another benefit to that is when you lease a car, most lease banks charge what's called a disposition fee or a turn-in fee. You'll see it on your contract. First thing I want you to know, it's not negotiable and it's not a dealer charge. It's something that's set by the bank. It's something they charge to cover their costs of disposing of your car. When you turn in the lease, they're going to send it to an auction, they're going to truck it there, they're going to sell it, and there's some costs associated with it. But some manufacturers will offer to waive your turn-in fee just to get you to get another one of their cars. Now here's something a lot of people don't know. You can actually extend your lease in most cases. Let's say you're on a 3-year lease, the lease is up and you're really not sure what you want to do. You like your car, you don't know if you want to get a new car. You may have the opportunity to extend your lease. Really what that consists of is just calling the bank, letting them know you'd like to extend your lease, and finding out what options they have to offer. Now, one of the things you do need to consider when extending your lease is you may have to pay to re-register your car for driving it another year. But it still may be a really good option for you.